Sapere aude. Dare to know. A podcast for those of you who are eager to know and learn things. Today we're going to speak about the incredible music of a composer. It's often said that a great deal of discoveries are made just by chance, but it is equally said that chance does not exist. Either by chance or causality. The thing is that some years ago, I came across the music of a composer I'd never heard of before. There isn't much information about him on the internet, just a couple of websites in English and German where you can find out about him, but still, information is scarce. I'm talking about the composer Leopold van der Pals. Listening to the album The Unity of Opposites by the Počekin brothers, Michael and Ivan Počekin, on the label Melodia, I had the opportunity to discover the 12 duos for two violins by a Russian composer who is quite unknown for the general public, Reinhold Glier. I found his music beautiful. One day, while interviewing Michael Počekin, he told me he hoped that after their recording, more and more musicians will play Glier's music so that more and more people would get to know him. My curiosity made me listen to more of Glier's music, and by the way, I recommend you to listen to the recording of his Symphony No. 3 by Johann Falletta and the Buffalo Philharmonic Orchestra on Naxos. I wanted to find out about Glier's life. I did so, and lo and behold, I ended up coming across the name of the composer I mentioned earlier, Leopold van der Pals. I immediately downloaded the few recordings available of his chamber music back then, works for cello and piano, and Sonata-Duo, Trio and Three Fugues, both of them on the Danish label Polyhymnia. I was surprised by the scherzo of the Sonata-Duo for cello and violin opus 55. It sounded so modern and genuine. There is also a recording of his Symphony No. 1 in F-sharp minor on the German label CPO, which I recommend as well. The little music we know of Leopold van der Pals is thanks to the efforts of one of his descendants, the Danish cellist Tobias van der Pals. The German composer and organist Wolfgang Graf has also written about Leopold van der Pals. It is from them both that I took the information which follows. I do encourage you, though, to follow your curiosity and to listen to the music of Leopold van der Pals. Leopold was born in the Imperial Russia, in the city of St. Petersburg in 1884. Culture was very present in his family. At age 12, he improvised on the piano and, encouraged by his grandfather Julius Johansen, a counterpoint professor and director of the Conservatory of St. Petersburg in the 1890s, he started to write music. Internationally renowned artists such as Pablo Casals, the brothers Tchaikovsky and Anton Arensky used to visit the home of the van der Pals and play music there. That was a source of huge inspiration for Leopold. Since he was the elder son, his father wanted him to study law and take over the family business, a rubber factory called Treugolnik. It was then that the mother of Leopold, Lucy van der Pals, persuaded her husband to allow their son to follow his musical path. At age 19, Leopold left Russia to continue his studies in Lausanne, Switzerland, with the famous composer and theorist Professor Alexander de Neres and with the cellist Thomas Canives. It was then that he started a cosmopolitan journey which marked his music. In 1906, he married to Marussia van Bese. She was of Russian origin and the niece of the German writer and Nobel laureate in 1910, Paul Heise. By the way, Heise was considered the best genius after Goethe. Robert Schumann and Hugo Wolf, among others, put music to some of his poems. 2 years later, in 1909, their daughter and only child Leah would be born. Marusha's passing away in 1934 affected Leopold deeply. He withdrew himself to Ascona in Switzerland and mourned his wife's death. In Ascona, Leopold wrote 80 poems dedicated to the memory and love of Marusha. He selected 45 out of those poems and set them to music. The resulting work was his Opus 96, In Memoriam, subtitled To My Wife's Spirit. Finally, Leopold settled down in Dornach, where he lived for 31 years, until his death in 1966. Leopold composed a total of 252 works, among them symphonies, operas, 700 songs, and chamber music. He had a very close relationship with authors, musicians, artists, and poets of his time, among others Rudolf Steiner, Andrei Bely, Rilke, Rachmaninoff, Koussevitzky, Scriabin. Leopold van der Pals remained a true European for his entire life. Born and raised in the Russia of the Tsars, of a Dutch father and a Danish mother, studies in Germany and Switzerland, where he finally settled down after long years of traveling. He spoke at least 6 languages, most of them fluently, and his friends and acquaintances came from all over Europe, not only from the music scene, but also from all culture and literature circles. Sometimes you have to pull the thread to discover a new world, and it seems to me that the music of Leopold van der Pals is a whole new world yet to be discovered. And to discover this world, we have with us today to the man himself, Tobias van der Pals. Hi, Tobias.
Hello, Michael. Nice to meet you like this.
Yes,
and thank you for a wonderful speech about Leopold.
Yeah, because we don't know each other in person. We've been speaking via internet, so to say.
Yes.
But
yes.
I'm really happy that you're here. And let me explain for those listeners, eventual listeners who listen to this program, to this podcast, why I wanted to have you here with us. So this series is called Sapere aude, and it's a series of podcasts on science, literature, arts, music, of course, and history. I've already posted 7 episodes, but in Spanish. So for those of you who understand Spanish, just I'll let you know that you could listen to 7 previous episodes. But this is the first one in English, and I wanted so because I remember when I decided to go for this series of podcasts, I asked Tobias van der Pals whether I could have permission to use the music of Leopold van der Pals as a jingle for the series of Sapere aude.
Yeah.
And that's the music you could listen at the beginning of this program. And Tobias said, of course, use it, and that's what I do. And now that I have the man himself, Tobias van der Pals, the one who is performing this music along with Elisabeth Zeuthen, is that right? The violinist?
The violinist is called Elisabeth Zeuthen Schneider.
Sorry, yes,
Zeuthen Schneider,
Zeuthen Schneider, exactly. And I made a mistake with the singer, Elisabeth Zeuthen. Okay.
It's also very good.
Yeah. So, for those of you who are listening now, this is the man himself playing that jingle, which belongs to a duo sonata, Sonata-Duo for cello and violin, the Opus 55 that I was speaking about before.
Yeah.
So let's get started. Tobias, I'd like to know what's your relationship to Leopold? How you came? Yes.
Yes. My relationship to Leopold is he is the brother of my great grandfather. That's our relation. So my great grandfather was a conductor, and his name was Nikolai, and they were brothers, Leopold and Nikolai, and they were both into the world of music, and was taught by their grandfather Julius Johansen when they were children in St. Petersburg. And now, when I grew up as a child, I had heard that there were a composer and also a conductor in the family, but there are stories in all families about what happened in previous generations, and Leopold and also Nikolai, they died in the 60s, and so it was a long time ago, and um, we didn't have anything to listen to by Leopold, his music, so I just accepted that there was these two musicians, and I thought not more about it. But when I, at some point, felt that the music was such a strong calling for me, that I started to work so that I could start to study in a musical academy. I I was more interested in what happened actually with these musicians from my family. So one day, after I had started my studies at the Royal Conservatory of Music in Copenhagen, I went to the library, and uh, there was a big music lexicon encyclopedia by Riemann, and I looked for my own name in that books, and I found Nikolai and Leopold. And what I found was actually was an eye opener for me, because I didn't know what they had done. I didn't know what Leopold had written. And in this book, I could read that he had written symphonies, operas, and songs and chamber music, and that he was performed by some of the world's best symphony orchestras at his own time. And it's also the same orchestras that are world famous today, like Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra and New York Philharmonic Orchestra. And that really triggered my interest. So what I did was I went uh, to my grandfather, Ernst, and he was the only one that I knew who had met Leopold in the 60s, short before Leopold died. And I said to my grandfather that I found this in the library in Copenhagen. And my initial thought is, if I can read about them in this library, you could read about them in any library in Europe. It was an interesting thought. There must be something to this. So I said to him, "Can we investigate this together?" And he said, "Yes, I would like to do that." So we organized a trip to Switzerland to visit Lea van der Pals, Leopold's daughter, who was at that time still alive. She was an elderly woman at the age of um, 90, 91 years old. And we came there, and it was a touching moment, because they met for the first time in 40 years. They were cousins, my grandfather and Leah.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, and actually, very short before we came into to her house, um, she had suffered a stroke, so she was not able to speak anymore. But she had already organized so that we should come in and see the archive, which held all Leopold's music. So we went to visit Leah, and we spoke to her, and we could see that she was following with her eyes. She was there with us, but she couldn't. Unfortunately, she couldn't speak anymore. Just a couple of weeks before we came, but we visited her. Then we went to the archive, and we came in, and there was a man greeting us, and we were shown to a room. And in this room, there were several cupboards, and they were opened, and they were all filled with music, handwritten thousands of pages of handwritten music.
What? That's a
And
great discovery.
yeah. That was, and then he said, "This is all by Leopold von der Pals," and I was just amazed. I was standing there in the same room as his complete life's work. Everything in one, there were one book of each piece, and it was all just lying there. It was handwritten. It wasn't lying anywhere else. So it was the only place in the world. It took him 80 years to compose all this music, and it was lying just in front.
How did you feel in that moment? That very moment you found that.
Well, it was just mesmerizing, and also it was a pretty wild experience, because I took out one book and I opened it, and it was a score for one of his operas. It was, I think, 600 pages or 800 pages, handwritten score. And it was all very neatly done. It was written with ink on paper, and there were no errors. It wasn't scribbled or difficult to read. It was very clear. And I knew already then what it takes to compose an opera. And so it was, I could just immediately see that there is handcraft involving this. There is will, there is professionalism, and there is it was just incredible to see all these hundreds of pieces lying in front of me. And I I think that at that moment, I had just started studying music myself, so I had the will to express myself through the music, and it didn't come from someone else. There was no one else in my family telling me to do it. It was only me who thought I wanted to do it. So when I came in there and saw that someone else from my family in previous generations had done the same and must have felt the same way that I did, that was a strong emotion, because suddenly I was feeling that I was doing the right thing, and it was like something else or someone else had been there guiding me a little bit. It was a strange
Yeah.
and a wonderful
And
experience.
why do you think the music of Leopold became unknown for the
Well,
general
there
public?
was there is this is a very good question, and thank you for that question. There are two main reasons for that resulted in all this music lying there when I found it. One of them is, or the first is, that Leopold, he was he started as an artist in the beginning of the 20th century, in the period of Belle Epoque, where the music developed in a speed of light. It was
So,
the
correct.
development
Yes.
of from romanticism to late romanticism to expressionism and impressionism and avant-gardism and 12-tone technique, and everything came through this development of music and art into the thoughts of the unknown aspects of the human mind,
Hmm.
basically. It wasn't all major minor, which they tried to create a new art. And this was the moment where Leopold studied as a musician, and this is also the moment where he had his first big concert in 1910 with his first symphony, before the First World War. And then if you continue his life, he is performed regularly all the way up until the Second World War. And the
Hmm.
Second World War is, for music and for art and for architecture and for literature, and it's a collective big mark between previous or before Second World War and after Second World War. After Second World War, you could not write a beautiful music of art, because the world had been destroyed. This was the general
Hmm.
perception of that time. So there was a, a lot of artists that didn't have any chance to get their music performed after the Second World War. And especially not someone who would write lyrical and beautiful music that is based on the harmony major minor. So after the Second World War, it was everything was replaced with avant-garde music. And then, of course, came the development of pop music and with all our other kinds of music. But in the music of the arts, this was the development. The development.
Yes.
So in this last 20 years of Leopold's life, he had no chance to get performances of his major pieces. If he um, if you consider that he was regularly performed by a Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra from 1910 to 1935 or something like that, you could wonder why was he not performed after the Second World War? You know, when you have
Exactly.
these
Exactly.
connections and you have, yeah, but and this was the artistic development of the time. That's just how it was. So this is one reason. It was the Second World War. The second reason is that Leopold has a very complex geographical background. His father was Dutch, his mother was Danish, and he grew up in St. Petersburg in Russia, and he studied in Germany and lived almost all his life in Switzerland. So there were already five countries involved, and for a classical musician or classical composer, you are very strong connected to one country or one group of people geographically. I mean,
Hmm.
let's look at some other composers. We have a lot of German composers that we all know, Brahms and Schumann and Beethoven and Austria, and we have Mozart, and we have Sibelius from Finland, we have Carl Nielsen from Denmark, we have Grieg from Norway, and we all have this connection, country
Hmm.
and the composer.
Yes.
And for Leopold, we have five countries, and none of them really clearly.
Yes.
So there was nobody who took his music as their own and invested into his music.
One question, because um, how did you manage to have the music of Leopold premiered or played again, so to say? Because
Yes,
there is plenty of music, first of all, and I don't think
yes,
it's
there is.
easy
Yeah,
to manage.
yeah. Well, um, this is also a good question. I when I found this music, it was in the year 2000. And first of all, I think that it was an enormous task for anybody to find an artist of any kind. In this case, it was music, but it would be the same if you would find an author in your family that had written 250 books.
Yes.
What would you do? You know, you would try to understand what is the background behind each work, what is the style of how they are done, and what was their life at his time, and so on and so on. And when you have this amount of artistic work, it's the task is very, very big. So what I did was I tried to invest a lot of time into understanding Leopold von der Pals. Who was he? What was his music? What was his life? And what was the ideas behind his compositions? And when I in this work, the progression made me find some pieces that I found interesting to start with, and also because I'm a cellist, I started to practice the cello pieces, and then I've just worked on one piece after a time, and you asked how to get these performances and recordings. Well, basically, I think that Leopold himself has a very big part of that, because if his music was not of high quality and interesting artistic value, then I would have a very difficult job.
Yes,
But
I agree with
luckily
it.
for me, his music is fantastic, and it's also interesting. So that means that I have been able to find musicians that will play it with me, and also orchestras that are willing to play his music.
For me, it was also a great discovery the first time I learned about Leopold
Mhm.
van der Pals, because for me, I mean, I wouldn't have said we always think, oh, we've listened to everything, we know everything, and then suddenly something new comes up, and it's like in the end like a miracle, I'd say.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, I'm very happy that you tell me about your experience with Leopold's music, because I can tell you, when I found all these 250 pieces, it was, when I started to look at the new piece, it was like walking into a desert island. It was like I was seeing a musical and artistic work that nobody had seen before me. At least no one alive today had seen it before me. So when I started to work on a piece, it was very private and very personal. And so what happened was that when I got um, a big interest in a piece, and I got a big experience when learning a piece, I could not be sure that others would see the same as I could see,
That's also
if
very
you see what I
interesting.
mean. Because I was alone, and it was. I hope that it wasn't just because I had found all this music that I could also somehow invest into the music, because I really wanted it to be good music, and then it was. So uh, I'm happy that you also got a big experience out of listening to this music, because it makes my feeling valid somehow, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, I understand, and I agree with you. It's for me, I'm always listening to music. I listen to any kind of music you can imagine,
Yeah,
and the music of the. I mean, as I said, I think I really, really, really think the music of Leopold is a whole world to be discovered. I mean, it's not
yeah,
discovered yet, in my
mm,
opinion. I know you're dealing with his music, but
yeah,
I guess there's a lot to do to make him better known for the audiences. So
yes, yes.
what are your plans to do that? What are you planning to to get
Well,
the music of
I have
Leopold listened?
I, yes, I have many plans actually. At the moment, I have some very concrete plans. First of all, I have signed a contract with a very, very good music publisher called Edition Willem Hansen. They are a part of the Wise Music Group, and their music is published worldwide. So the music that will be the music will now be digitalized from the original manuscripts into a playable state and printed, so that people around the world can buy this music and to play it. And this is a very, very important job, because all the works, I'm actually sitting now next to them, because I have them here in
Mm-hmm.
my studio. I have all his music here in the handwritten form, so it's just next to me, and it's only here at the moment. Nobody can see it because it's not printed yet. But
I
in the
wish I could
future,
see that someday.
yeah, yes, you're welcome to come and visit me and see my archive.
Don't tell me twice because I go there and see.
Well, it will be my pleasure. Um, So this work is very important to make it accessible for people around the world to play it themselves. And then second of all, his I find the new pieces to play all the time, and at the moment I'm preparing to play the first performance, the premiere performance actually, of his first cello sonata, which was written in 1905, 1906. And I found the manuscripts, and I also found out that this piece, which is a cello sonata in 4 movements, which plays about 30 minutes, was actually never performed. And so I will play the first performance with my pianist Paul Eide in America, in New York, on November 10th. So if you are in New York or around New York in November, come watch me play this premiere performance in Carnegie Hall.
That's an event, I'd say.
At 8 o'clock. Yeah.
I,
That would
I,
be an
I wish
exciting.
I wish I could go.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm afraid I can't in November, but I'm sure Tobias one day will meet up. I'm quite
Oh,
sure.
I'm sure.
Sure, it's a matter.
Maybe
It's just a matter of time. I'm telling you.
yes, absolutely. Maybe I can tell you just a few sentences about this sonata because it's quite
Yes,
interesting.
please go.
In 1905, Leopold had finished his studies in Lausanne. So he was now he had an education as a pianist, cellist, and a composer, but he was unsure of what he wanted to put all his cards on, because he wanted to focus on one thing. And what happened was that he got problems with his lungs. He went to the doctor, and they said, you have a beginning of tuberculosis, so you need to go to a sanatorium. And so he had to go to Davos in Switzerland for a full year to recover from this lung disease. And during this year, no, yeah, he was not allowed to bring his cello to the sanatorium. It was apparently a sanatorium with no instruments allowed. So when he was there, he decided to write something that collected all of his capacities as musician, composer, piano, and cello. So he composed a cello sonata. And it was a big work for him, and it took him months to finish this piece. And when he finished it, he came out and his lungs were cured, and he decided that he would be a composer and not a cellist.
Very
Now,
interesting.
why was it not performed then? I guess that it was because very shortly after this, Leopold got married, and he went on a honeymoon with his wife. And one day he got a telegram from his father saying that, Leopold, you must come to Paris immediately, because I'm organizing a festival together with my friend Diaghilev. And it's going to be, it's called Saison Russe. No, it was called Grand Concert de Russe in the Paris Opera. And the idea was Russian composers playing their own music. So for this first festival, Rimsky-Korsakov came, and César Cui, and Rachmaninoff, and Nikish, and Chaliapin, and a bunch of other composers as well. And Leopold came there, and he was staying at the same hotel as these other composers, and they were sitting in the evenings and speaking by the supper. And one day, Leopold decided he wanted to ask Rachmaninoff um, about his music. So he took his music with him under his arm, and he went up and he knocked on Rachmaninoff's door, probably with a beating heart, I would imagine. And Rachmaninoff opened, And what happened was that Leopold came in, they started playing to each other their music, and they became friends. And Leopold asked Rachmaninoff, "What do you think that I should do? Because I just came from this sanatorium. I feel like I've lost a year in my development. I want to get back on track. I want to learn more." And Rachmaninoff said to him, I think you should go to my friend Reinhold Glier. He is in Paris at the no, he is in Berlin at the moment, and I will write to him and ask if you can come. So Rachmaninoff did that, and Leopold went directly from Paris to Berlin, where he continued his studies with Glier. And at this moment, his music took a turn. He started to develop in another direction, and the cello sonata was left behind somehow,
Mm-hmm.
because he found a new expression. And when that happens, Leopold was only 21 years old when he wrote this cello sonata. So he considered it to be a youth piece. But a couple of years later, or some time later, he revisited the cello sonata and actually decided to include it in his opus count. So it became opus 5A, um, but it was originally a youth piece. So that's why it was left behind
Mm-hmm.
without the performance. And when I found it, it was in a bit incomplete state. It was without dynamics and without slurs in the music. So I've used a lot of time um, to understand the very core of this piece, in order
Mm-hmm.
to put in all these dynamics and understand how to develop the music in the right way through this 30 minutes.
So in a way, it's like the music of Bach.
Yes, you can say it was only the notes, nothing else.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. So while you were speaking, I was thinking that this is a perfect story for a novel or a book on Leopold van der Pals. It's
Yeah.
really I mean, when I discovered the music of Leopold and his life
Mm,
story,
mm,
I immediately I mean, I was amazed, really.
mm, mm.
And my thoughts were, how is it possible that his music is not known? But now I understand, because of what you said, what you've said before. I can
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess it's a huge effort for you to make his music disseminated, so to say.
Yes, yes, it's a very big job, but it's very rewarding for me to work with it, because I feel like whenever a piece is supposed to be is on a program to be played, the music is digitalized, and when I'm sitting here and I'm looking at all the different versions that Leopold did, and maybe there are parts, and maybe there are a sketch, and different versions of a score, and I prepare it for so that it's ready to be played, and all during all that time, it's almost like it's my piece, it's part of my expression, and it's wonderful to experience this music for the first time, because I really enjoy it so much. I'm a big fan of Leopold, I must say.
I'm a big fan of him too. But of
Yeah.
course, you know more music of Leopold than I do, because
Yes, I mean
I only know
there
the
are
two recordings you released actually a couple of years
yeah.
ago.
Yeah, there will be a new release in a few weeks now, with his string quartets number 1, 2, 3,
Hmm.
also on CPO, and we have recorded them with my string quartet, the Van der Pals string quartet, and um, yeah, they're great. The first string quartet is from 1918, and the second is from 1924, and I think the third is from 1928 or 29. And the third
Uh-huh.
string quartet is actually called Metamorphosen.
Uh-huh.
So it's an idea of Leopold to develop the music in a metamorphical state, which, because it's a different attitude to
Uh-huh.
develop than to use normal
Yeah,
forms like a sonata form or a rondo form or
right.
so.
Was it
So he
easy?
has used something else.
Was it easy for you to date the works?
Yes, it is actually very easy to date the works because, first of all, Leopold himself very often wrote on the last page of every piece. He wrote the time and place that he completed the work. So here we can see when exactly and where. And also, I have all his diaries. Leopold wrote diaries during all his life.
In which
And
language?
in German.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, in German, and he it's in total it's 36 books, and so when I have a piece, I can see when it was completed, and then I can go to the diary, and I can look up exactly that day or the week around it, and I can see what happened for him at that time. Who did he meet, and what did they say, and
Oh, that's so
what was
interesting.
his feelings around this, and yes, it's very interesting because it brings him very much alive, and it brings him into a place of time and space in Europe, or in a time which was very dramatical
Hmm.
with all the wars and the political tensions and the
You know, the thing is that I find so interesting talking about Leopold. I find interesting talking about music in general, but the story
mm,
of Leopold, I mean, it's amazing. But you know,
mm,
these episodes usually last from 30 minutes to 45 minutes, and we're reaching almost 45 minutes. But before
yeah,
we leave, uh,
mm,
to my guests, I always ask ask them two questions, and I ask them to do something for me. So the two questions I
yes.
wanted to ask you: if you would have a book to recommend, which book would it be?
Aha. A book to recommend.
Yeah.
I would recommend to read the early poems by the poet Rainer Maria Rilke. This this poet is has always been extremely fascinating for me, and somehow with this poet, with his words, they affect me so deeply. So this is something that I would recommend.
Good. Second question: if you would have a recording to recommend, which recording would it be, or an
Oh,
album?
this is yeah, this is also difficult to tell you one recording. I would
Well, you can say two or three if you wish.
okay, let's see. I have hmm, one or two recordings. Well, one of them has to be something by Leopold.
Yes.
I would ask you. I would recommend to listen to the first album with Leopold's orchestra music, which we have recorded on CPO. And why this recording? It's because in these four works that are on this CD
Hmm.
is the first symphony, Frühling und Herbst, and which are smaller pieces for orchestra, and the dramatic poem Wieland der Schmied. And here you can find the development in the early years of Leopold, from romantic music to impressionistic to expressionistic, and to his own dramatic language in Wieland der Schmied, which is the last piece in that album. And this development for me is very important and very interesting. So if you want to learn who is Leopold von der Pals, you can listen to these four
Hmm.
works, and you can hear that it's all of these styles as I just said, but it's also Leopold von der Pals at the
Great.
same time.
And now, last, I always it's a request more than a question.
Mm-hmm.
I always say to my guests, if you would have a message to leave for people who would listen to it maybe in 50 years' time, 100 years' time, 1,000 years' time, in case there's still someone to listen, what message would you like them to have from you, from Tobias van der Pals?
Also a very good question, also a difficult question. Well, now that we have been speaking about Leopold van der Pals and music in general, my request would be to try to have an open mind to experience new things, because people have a tendency to like what they know and be afraid of what they don't know. So to open your mind, to be able to discover, to be curious, and to recognize things that happen to you that you find without prejudice, without a negative mind. It's positive, curious mind. That's what I want people to have. If people could find that in 50 years, I would be happy. I hope I will be still around to see that happen.
So, Tobias, thank you very much. Maybe we could record another podcast on the string quarters once they are released, if you wish.
Yes.
But I really thank you, because I was waiting. I was really looking forward to talking to you and record this episode in English, because this is going to be the first one, and there will be more coming on science, music, literature, culture, history, etc. And I'm very happy that the first one was about Leopold van der Pals.
Well, thank you very much, Michael, for doing this, and thank you for having me on the show. It was my pleasure.